Welcome. This will be a completely spoiler-free, for this game at least, possibly not for the franchise leading up to it, review of the 2001 expansion pack to Red Alert 2, Yuri's Revenge. So I think a good place to start... Right, a couple of things before I start. This is a review from memory. I have not played this in like, I don't know, 10, 15 years, but I used to play it all the time. I have dozens, possibly over 100 hours of playing this game. And it's a game that I kind of absolutely love. There's so much wonderful stuff here. Yes, so right, and let's see, it's probably, I forget what the rating is called, but it's probably it's teen, maybe. The game is rated T for teen, something like that. So will this video be. So I have to. I'm not going to spend forever on it, but I do have to briefly talk about. So the at the end of Red Alert 2, the war has a conclusive ending, regardless of which of the two campaigns you play. So for this to have a war, they, I would say, had to, but I don't think they did. They certainly didn't have to go as hard as they did. You know why there's a war in this game? It's because of time travel. They didn't start a new war. They went back to the old one, and there's like battles going on that you're not quite connected to because of the overall war. Yeah. So this one introduces the army of Yuri, the faction Yuri. And Yuri is thankfully still played by the inimitable Udo Kier. Like, he is just so wonderful, and he understood the assignment. He has more screen time in this than in Red Alert 2, where, in Red Alert 2, like, I think they did a good job of setting up, he's like, there's something more with that guy. He's not gonna just settle for, second fiddle here. No. He's got plans. They kind of had him as, I don't know if they felt they needed to have someone other than Kane, because he kind of fulfills in Red Alert 2. Yuri fulfills the role that Kane did in Red Alert 1. So, he's there in the background. He's advising the bad guy, and we feel like he's not gonna be okay with just being, the guy giving, or he's is Grima Wormtongue maybe a good comparison, something like that, and with that, that was back when Red Alert was still a prequel to Command and Conquer, Tiberian Dawn, the first Command and Conquer game. So they had him, so we knew, by the end of that, he's poisoned Stalin. He takes over power, creates Nod out of, the Soviet Union, something like that, and here, Yuri takes, he becomes a true threat. And let's see, I think that might more or less cover, but yeah, it's so freaking good to have so much of Udo Kier. He is hamming it up. He is like, this was around the time when everyone was hamming it up in these. Not everybody acquits themselves equally well. Udo Kier is one of the best. He is simply so wonderfully, like, he's got this hypnotic, like, I don't know if someone said, we should have like a hypnosis bad guy in Riddler 2. That would be cool. And then someone else was like, so we cast Udo Kier. Or if it was that they were like, we should cast Udo Kier in Riddler 2. And then someone else was like, he should hypnotize people. That should be like the thing that he brings to. But yeah, like, I'm sorry. If I met Udo Kier in real life, I'm sure he's a wonderful. Well, I have no idea. I don't really follow that kind of stuff. But I would be like thinking, are you trying to hypnotize me? Because like he's just got that air about him, you know. But yeah, I think that covers. I guess I'll just briefly acknowledge. So, as is the case with other of these expansion packs, you know, the cutscenes are not as good. I'm gonna be 100% honest. I don't even remember other than the intro. And that's not the case. You know, I remember like you know, Riddler 2, for example. I remember the one where they've been hypnotized into being Soviets. So, you know, General Carville is sitting there. He's got he's stirring his coffee with you know, Soviet Union flag. You've got the one where like a door, you know, someone opens the door and like there's a crazy Ivan, and it seems like they maybe made the cutscene. Maybe that's part of why I remember it. They made the cutscene when they thought that, oh, Crazy Ivan's going to be like, you know, suicide bomber or something. When, you know, in the game, no, he puts bombs on other people. But you know, whatever. But yeah, the intro video is just not quite as good. Like the one for Alert 2, I talked about it in my video on that. You know, it is freaking epic. Where the one here is just kind of like they talk a little, you know, there's like, oh, Yuri, you know, you can't do this or we'll stop you or something. And then like we see some jets attack a thing, and that leads into, you know, I think it's the first GDI. Sorry. Had my brain on the other Allied forces, not GDI. That's the other continuity. Anyway. Yeah. Which, you know, I guess I get. And it's not nothing. It could have been worse. And at least Udo Kier's in it, you know? So that's cool. But the when it comes to like plot, I honestly mostly remember that they come up with these completely ridiculous and just incredible, just very, very memorable missions along the way. One of them, you're going through Hollywood, and the some of the people you meet along the way are famous, you know, action icons that you can then, you know, use as units, and they'll have their iconic weapon. So they're definitely based on Clint Eastwood, Schwarzenegger. They must have Stallone in there. I feel like Stallone's probably in there, but they gave them parody names, possibly to avoid a lawsuit or something. But like those are definitely them, and they have like they had them voiced too, you know, and the impersonations are decent enough, and they'll say stuff that fits, you know. There's a mission where you go to the moon, and you know, you don't use the regular units, the soldiers that walk. You use I'll say they call it Rocketeers. I think I misidentified those in my video on Red Alert 2. I apologize. I believe the Rocketeers in Red Alert 2 and this are the flying ones. You know, yeah. Yeah, it gets so goofy and weird, and like I don't know if development phase. It's possible that because I remember when Riddler 2 came out, and we were like, you know, oh, cool gameplay, but the tone is it's so goofy. You know, I appreciate that if, you know, this franchise always had goofy, you know, but it used to be sincere, you know, and that just has a different impact than when you do goofy on purpose. So I don't know if they picked up on that and they were like, well, joke's on you, we're gonna go, to 11 now, or if it was just they kind of fell in love with the idea of making it even goofier. But it's so incredibly goofy here, and it's just wonderful. The plot and the campaigns are not going to be for everyone, or were not for everyone. So about a nearly quarter century old game here. I feel old. But yeah, it's very much, if you liked that about Riddler 2, you're gonna love it here. And if you tolerated it and barely got through it in Riddler 2, this one might, put you, like, there were times back when I first played this, I came to appreciate it on replays. But there were times during the campaigns where I just had to, like, take a minute to be like, okay, you know what, this is really freaking silly. And again, to be clear, that I'm talking about the story and the missions themselves. I'm not talking about the overall gameplay, because that's the thing. Like, they actually did, Riddler 2 already had, like, I think I did say in my video on Riddler 2, but that was, some months ago, but there was very, very little left that they could have done that they didn't for that. Like, essentially, it's the fact that we still, attack move wasn't introduced until generals, which is pretty ridiculous. They were very, very slow to implement that. But yeah, other than that, like, there's almost nothing you can point to about Riddler 2, like, tactics-wise, where one of them has a completely unfair advantage, or there's a unit or weapon that you can just do nothing about. Like, some of the ones that are just ridiculously powerful, you get a warning. Like, if your enemy is building a Kirov, or multiple, every time one is done, you too will hear Kirov reporting. So okay, I gotta prepare for a Kirov. Someone is building if an enemy is building a super weapon, it gets revealed, no fog of war for that specific part, and there's a countdown to when it'll be ready that is visible to you. So you'll know how much time you have to either destroy it or, I don't know, prepare for the devastation, But somehow they found ways to add things. Right, I guess I'll just briefly note, I think this is also the one where on some of the missions you get to use some of the units that used to be unique to multiplayer. If you play Allied forces as Korea, you get these jets that are extremely powerful. You get those in one of the campaign levels now, but if I recall, it's only ever one per mission, and it's only for that mission. You don't get it for any other mission, but it's still there for multiplayer and skirmish as well. But yeah, I'm definitely going to talk about what Yuri brings to the table. But first, I do want to talk about some of the really cool stuff that gets added for the other two factions. So the Allies get a Guardian GI, and for those who don't know or have forgotten, the GI in Red Alert 2 and Year's Revenge is a guy with an assault rifle or something, and he can be deployed to where it's essentially like machine gun nest. The Guardian GI, let's see, I think is it that he has to be deployed in order for it to work? I think maybe. Certainly he is deployable also, and he's very effective against vehicles, and he's also very good anti-air. Yeah, basically, bazooka. Yeah. And let's see. Yeah, the Navy SEAL used to be campaign only, now available in skirmish and multiplayer. And Tanya can now use the C4 charges on land vehicles as well, in addition to the buildings. So she is ridiculously effective. Like if you get a Tanya into an enemy base that doesn't have, basically it's anti-infantry. She's vulnerable to what other infantry are. But yeah, if you get her into an enemy base that doesn't have anti-infantry, defenses, whether it's units or buildings or what, she can demolish in so little time. And the Allies also get a robot tank, an amphibious unmanned anti-structure anti-vehicle tank, which is immune to mind control but does require a powered robot control center to function, which of course does mean, extremely effective against the Yuri faction. And if you're playing as Yuri, disable the robot control center, so it's really nicely done. And the thing is, if am I thinking of the right thing? If I recall, the robot tanks will come back under control if you get if you temporarily lose power, you can't control them. But if you get power back, I think it just reestablishes connection, I think that might also be true if you build a new one, but honestly right now I do not quite remember. And there's the Battle Fortress, a heavily armored personnel carrier with 5 infantry slots, from which each infantry unit can fire its own weapon, and the Battle Fortress can crush other vehicles. This is, I can't overemphasize how freaking awesome it is. Just like complete, yeah. And to be clear, I'm not, it is not like invulnerable or something, yeah. And yeah, so you can put multiple different infantry, if you've got a battle fortress and you're going up against infantry, put Tanya in there. And yeah, you can also put the Guardian GIs in there and some regular GIs. Yeah. And let's see. Yeah, I think that is it for the Allies. And so the Soviets get Boris, who, basically you can think of as like their version of Tanya. It is kind of interesting that the Allies have, someone with a Eastern European name. I don't know if they were like purposefully saying, oh, she's like a defector or something, or I don't know. She might have been born in one of the Allied countries and just happened to have some ancestry, Anyway, Boris, he's got like a machine gun instead of dual handguns, and incredibly effective against infantry. And instead of where Tanya has to get up close to place her C4, he has this laser pointer that he can call a squadron of MiG planes in. And the thing is that once he has called them in, they will destroy that structure. He calls in so many that even if some are, or is it that they can't be shot down? I forget. But it's, however, you can stop him by, if your enemy is using Boris, stop him by shooting him before the MiGs come in. I forget how long it is, but it is a little time. And that's the trade-off. He is less, Tanya is vulnerable in that she has to get right up to the building, which, basically means, well, make sure she doesn't get close to your buildings. Whereas Boris, he doesn't have to get particularly close, but he is super vulnerable. And obviously, if you are trying to call in a strike, and then you see the enemy moving anti-infantry units close to borders, move them away, So that, again, trade-off. And let's see. Yeah, the Soviets get a siege chopper, a helicopter which uses a machine gun identical to that of the Nighthawk transport when in the air, and a powerful siege cannon when deployed on land. It's so effective. It's ridiculous. And they, again, like by this point, they had nailed how far these siege cannons can fire without just being like, okay, come on, this is ridiculous. Like the one in Tiberian Sun, which then gets nerfed in Firestorm to the point where like a lot of us just stopped using that unit entirely, and here they handle it much better. Let's see. Yeah. The Soviets can buy an industrial plant, a support structure that reduces the cost of the owner's vehicles and or refineries, a battle bunker, garrisonable structure with 5 infantry slots. So think of it as the battle fortress, but it can't move, basically. And again, really, really great. And this is also something that they, like, there's garrisonable, what's it called? Defensive structures in generals, for example, also. Let's see. Yeah, and the spy plane, a support power which calls a plane to reveal parts of the shroud in a straight line, and it requires a radar tower. And the Soviets lose the Psi Corps trooper, Yuri, as it is transferred to Yuri's army as the Yuri clone. And let's see. Yeah, and they lose the cloning vat and psychic sensor, also transferred to Yuri's army. And let's see. Yeah, and the psychic sensor becomes a radar equivalent with the psychic reveal ability. And Yuri's faction itself is there was a while where I could not get enough of playing either as or against Yuri, to an extent that I think was unique until I started playing 0 Hour. Yes. So the regular unit is called the Initiate. And it's essentially, like the GI, the Allied GI of the Soviet conscript, just the regular, but more powerful. They can start fires with only their mines, very effective against infantry structures, as well as vehicles when garrisoned in a building. They're basically, they're scanners, they're going around using their mine powers to mess everything up for everybody else, and just, yeah. Let's see, the Brute is Yuri's anti-armor unit. A huge mutant, smash, yeah. And the let's see, they're especially good against enemy tanks. Tank weapons are almost useless against them. They're immune to dogs. And let's see, terror drones are still a problem. They're also immune to Yuri's mind control. And the Brute is one of the places where you really see the tone being goofier, because as per usual, the unit says something when you click on it, when you give it orders, and I have to mention at least one of them, because this thing, which of course, basically looks like the Hulk. I think they give it a different color, maybe purple or something, but like it's the Hulk, and that's also with the Yuri faction, they really embrace this thing of like, no, he will just make, like, he'll, he'll mutate human beings to make, to make it's obviously important for the faction to be significantly different from the Allies and the Soviets. That's part of the appeal here, So yeah, there is no, it is science completely unconstrained by ethics, scientific genius. And yeah, so the Brute, one of the things, and right, and I think I may have, did I mention, use anti, what are they called again? Anti infantry, So yeah, like for example, Tanya or Boris very quickly take out brutes. Possibly not quite as fast as regular, but still, And let's see, yes. Anyway, so when the Brute, one of the things that the Brute can say is, "Give me your lunch money." Like it is a frickin' middle school bully or Republican politicians, which I guess I just described the same person just at different stages of life. Like that genuinely does, if that doesn't tell you how goofy the tone gets here, I don't know what will. Then we have the Virus, Yuri's sniper unit. And yeah, there's some similarity to the British sniper, kill infantry from a great range. So, very, very, let's see, I believe the range is greater than Tanya and Boris, for example. So that's one, Yuri, with Yuri, they give him some units that are incredibly powerful, but then there are other units that he doesn't have, so he does not have an infantry unit that can do anti-aircraft. You'll note that the Brute is ground-based. This Hulk doesn't jump in the air to attack, flying things. And let's see, yeah, so some trade-offs. Great range, but also no anti-aircraft. And yeah, the Virus, uses these deadly toxins that make infantry units explode in a cloud of toxic viral fumes. They didn't get the COVID vaccine. And structures and tanks were slightly damaged when coming into contact with these clouds. And infantry explode and die, creating a chain reaction. Have I made it clear how much I freaking love this game? Like, that's such an awesome... So yeah, if you're trying to attack Yuri's faction with a bunch of infantry, be careful about the Virus, that's... And then at the same time, the Virus can't really do anything about, for example, aircraft, and she's not optimal against tanks, and there are tanks that are anti-infantry, so I mean, from what I recall, something that worked pretty well against Virus, if you can get close enough, put, for example, Tanya into an IFV, and if you're playing as Soviets, I believe the terror drones are pretty good against Virus. And yeah, let's see, there's not much to say about the Yuri clone. They're still, really, really useful as, yeah, they take over the enemies attacking them. And again, with them, if you're going up against Yuri clones, you'll want to make sure to take them out at great range, which, the is there a good example? I don't know. I guess, I mean, again, for example, aircraft, and all three of them do have some air yeah, at least one aerial unit. And yeah, you can train Yuri himself riding a hovering platform, because we've gone full comic book, you know, come to me, my X-Men, you know, it's just, it's wonderful. And yeah, you can, right, let's see, in multiplayer you can only train one Yuri Prime at a time. That's also such a perfect name, Yuri Prime. You know, unless cloning that, in that case you can have two. And yeah, mind control, base defenses, structures, infantry units, tanks, ships, and let's see. Yeah, and your prime secondary weapon, you know, can do this psychic shockwave that does not cause friendly fire and has a shorter cooldown time than the clones. Just, yeah, fantastic. And yeah, like you genuinely can, if you are if you play your game right, you can move some Yuri Primes. Like you'll want to bring other units as well, you know. But yeah, bring a bunch of units, make an attack force. Use the other units to force the enemy to focus on them. Use Yuri Prime to take over. You know, for example, you could start with, I don't know, base defenses. Once you've mind controlled, you know, two base defenses, sell them both. Then move on to other building, perhaps more base defenses if necessary. Otherwise, move on to regular structures and just like, yeah. If you're playing against the Yuri faction, do not let Yuri Prime close, because he's gonna wreck you. Like, there is not gonna be. It's so freaking cool. And again, like at the end of the day, you know, use, for example, aircraft. And let's see. I am fairly confident that when, let's see, I believe you get a warning when your enemy trains Yuri Prime. I think you hear him, you know, speak an iconic line, so you'll know. So let's see. Yeah, the vehicles. So the battle tank is the Lasher light tanks, which you know, they're not as strong as the heavy ones like the Rhino, but they are very fast and they match the Grizzly battle tank. And when stationed in a tank bunker, it's heavily armored versus ground attacks, made it very effective base defense. Chaos drones could deploy to emit a special toxin which drove enemy infantry berserk, turning them temporarily against their comrades, and it could remain in this state for an extended period or redeploy at will. Like, that's such an amazing, that's the thing, like, big theme with Yuri the faction. He likes turning the enemy against themselves, you know, and it's so different, you know. Like, yeah, you had Yuri clones in Riddler 2, and this one takes that and just runs with it, like the Flash level running, just. And he's got Gatling tanks that are very fast, could easily kill infantry and shoot down aircraft. Once their guns spun up fully, they would do heavy damage, even to Kirov airships and some light tanks. And that's the thing. Like, I remember playing this with a friend of mine back when it was new, and you know, he struggled a little against Yuri's Gatling. And something that we noticed was the Gatling gets more effective the longer it goes. So you gotta be careful to take it out quick. It's gonna be a real problem if you don't, because in addition to, there's the Gatling tank, there's also his base defenses are Gatling, and the thing is, again, effective against Kirov. Like if you're using, if we're talking about a Kirov attacking a base, you're not going to want just the Gatling guns there, but with the Gatling tanks as well, that helps a lot. But then the let's see, you have the what was the other thing I wanted to say? Yeah, there's the Gatling guns. you know, they're very, very fast, very effective, and get stronger the longer they go. But it also has to defend against both ground and air. You know, it can fire on both, but it can only fire on one at a time per Gatling, tank or tower. And that does mean that if you throw enough stuff at a Gatling anything, yeah, eventually you'll take it out, And let's see. And it also, one of the things it accomplishes, again, we're talking trade-offs, it accomplishes that if you're playing as Yuri, be on the offensive, you don't have to be offensive, but I don't know. I'm sure he knows some harsh jokes. But let's see. Yeah. He's, and that's also something you notice when you're playing against Yuri. He attacks. He doesn't wait. He is a conqueror. And yeah, let's see. Then you also have the Magnetron, useful against vehicles. They don't damage vehicles, but they allow Yuri commanders to lift and drag enemy vehicles toward Yuri clones or masterminds. Yeah. And magnetized vehicles could not attack, but were vulnerable to anti-air fire, while airborne, helping to destroy them. Yeah. And the Magnetron acted as the Yuri artillery, could be used to tear buildings apart from afar. So again, it's a little bit different. It's different enough that, because again, like basically, this game has 3 factions, and this was when they started to really make sure that each faction had, with the Yuri faction, he doesn't have all of the same things as the other two. The other two have roughly the same thing. You could, for most of it, you could point to, okay, the Allies have this, but the Soviets have this, and they're roughly equivalent, and there would be something to very clearly counter it. With Yuri, some of the time you do still have these, but there are things he doesn't have. And it, again, the Gatling tanks cannot they work well as anti-aircraft, but they are not exclusively anti-aircraft, which does mean that sometimes you'll have to tell it, okay, I want you to attack the air right now, where the anti-aircraft units, the ones that are exclusively anti-aircraft, they're just going to attack anything that any enemy that comes within range that is in the air. So, that's a little bit of extra micromanaging that Yuri has to do. And let's see, yeah, and Magnetron, functioning as Yuri artillery also means, you have to stop the Magnetron. You can't shoot down missiles, the way that, from Red Alert 2, after, starting with that one, you can shoot down, I forget if it's all of them, but it's several of the next ones. It's true in Generals as well, but yeah, with the Magnetron, you have to destroy the Magnetron itself, which again is useful against, vehicles. So but vulnerable to aircraft, so. And yeah, and then you have the Mastermind, Yuri's ultimate mind control unit, the near equivalent of a mobile psychic tower, being able to control up to 3 units safely. And let's see, however, it could not stop at a safe number. Instead, they controlled anything they could target in the vicinity. This resulted in a brainwave overload that could severely damage and destroy the Mastermind, requiring near constant supervision by its commander lest it be lost. So again, some trade-off there. It is ridiculously effective, but if you are up against a mastermind, yeah, like you can overwhelm it. Make sure to really get as many units as you can close to it. And the Yuri faction player, or yeah, AI, is going to try to take out those units as quickly as it can. Yeah. Let's see. And yeah. So as far as aircraft goes, so Yuri, didn't use, jets and such. He used, I hope this one doesn't lose you. This one loses some people. He uses a floating disc. Yes. This game has flying saucers. And it has this, powerful laser that's like, one-shot infantry. It's quite effective against vehicles. And it can also siphon, so if you order the floating disc to attack a power plant, it forces that player's entire base into low power, which you may recall turns off defensive buildings, which really renders you extremely vulnerable, but it does also mean that the floating disc has to stay right there over that, so yeah, you can take it out. It takes a little doing, but it is doable. And let's see, yeah, and if you use it against an enemy refinery, it steals credits, giving them to Yuri until there were none left or the disc was shot down. And yeah, if it's let's see, yeah, if it's ordered to attack a base defense, it powers it down, with the exception, some exceptions anyway. Let's see, and yeah, I think that right, and yeah, they still can fire their lasers when siphoning, so they're not exactly defenseless. So yeah, and that's the thing, if you send a couple of floating discs into an enemy base, if you're able to, you can turn off the power, you can steal their money. Like, it's so ridiculous. Like, Yuri the faction can really wipe the floor with any player not sufficiently prepared. It is such a joy to play as or against him, because like, yeah, these, like, taking out these enemies like this is so cool, and defeating a Yuri is so satisfying because he puts you through the ringer. And yeah, he's got his own amphibious transports, good to have as, yeah. Right, I forget if I mentioned, he does also have engineers, and yeah, the only combatant naval unit that Yuri has is the Boomer submarine, a stronger version of the Soviet and Typhoon attack submarine, able to fire 2 torpedoes at once. It can also launch ballistic missiles on land targets like the Soviet dreadnought. So it's combining several, of these. And again, you can shoot down those missiles if you have enough. But if there's a lot of Boomer submarines, yeah, that's it. Like, hope you enjoyed. Yeah, like, good game, but you're gone now. Like, it's ridiculously just, yeah. And at the same time, it's not like impossible to, like, so let's see. It's a submarine. So if you're playing as well, let's see. I guess I'll just, yeah. The Allies should use dolphins. The Soviets should use the squids. They'll be able to attack and reveal these the boomers. And those are quite good if you have Nebula or considering it. Boomers, good documentary. Anyway, yeah, they'll reveal the boomers, and sure, the boomers can fight back, but as soon as they're visible, that's it. Like, the other yeah, any unit that's close enough by can attack it. Even ground units can attack the submarines once they're revealed, if they're within range. I just realized my eyes drifted. I'm right. I guess I should. Yeah, I'm on the Command and Conquer wiki. Some of this information is. I don't remember all of this, but yeah, I just realized the war. I already mentioned they use time travel to create a war here. It's the Third World War. Wow. Let's see, and yeah, Yuri's super weapons. One of them is the genetic mutator, which turn any infantry, either friendly, hostile, or neutral, into loyal brutes. And animals, so dogs, squid, dolphins, cannot be mutated; they simply die. So, yeah, super effective. What I love about this is that there were times where I used that on an enemy base that had, like, for them, unfortunate tight cluster of infantry. There you go. I might not be able to destroy the entire base, but I could do a lot of damage to it with those brutes. And then other times I would just use it on my own. Yeah, I'd have a bunch of I have initiates, I think they're called. The regular, because I'm fairly confident they are at least slightly cheaper and faster to produce. So yeah, that's a good way to get more of them. And the Psychic Dominator is the the genetic mutator is the equivalent of the chronosphere or the red curtain. Then we have the one that is the equivalent of the nukes and the weather control machine, the Psychic Dominator. It's capable of permanently mind controlling any units within, it says, 3x3 area. It's not a huge area, but it's not nothing. And it unleashes raw psychic energies capable of damaging or destroying structures. Units garrisoned inside a structure with mind controlled if the power is used on the building. Using the Psychic Dominator in combination with the genetic mutator could turn many enemy units against their allies, even in the heart of an enemy base, causing immense chaos. Just like it's so ridiculous. Like, genuinely, you use the Psychic Dominators to take out a couple of buildings. You'll be mind controlling the units that were that come out when the buildings are destroyed, and the ones that were close enough by. And then you use the genetic mutator, the same spot. There you go. Like, you are able to take out even more of the enemies. And again, you are told, you're warned when the what's the word, about the when a Yuri faction that is your enemy builds a genetic mutator and or a Psychic Dominator, there's a countdown, and you see exactly where it is from the moment that it is constructed. Yeah, just, it's such a cool, like, yeah. Let's see. I think the that might more or less. Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. So to get the let's see, the what's the word? Instead of the normally, like, the other two have they build a refinery, and then they have the I forget what it's called, and it's not, let's go with miners. The miner will go out and gather ore and go back to the refinery. Yuri has something called slave miners, and it's the refinery that moves, which means that you don't have to wait for the miner to go back to the refinery, and you don't have to build extra refineries in faraway mining locations. Like, it's so effective. And you also have this grinder where you can send, for example, captured units in, for some money, and I mean, you could basically send anyone into the grinder that you want, and the it again underlines how utterly ruthless he is. Like, if you thought the Soviet Union was bad, yeah. And let's see, I think pretty much covers the. It does also work well as a metaphor for capitalism. It's very industrialism. Or I guess the Mangler, the movie based on the Stephen King story. Anyway, and the if that made someone money, I mean, rather than being just a slight inconvenience for some rich person who made a lot of money taking advantage of people, which should not be looked up to. Let's see. I think there is. That might actually be. Let's see. Yeah, that might actually be the entirety of. But yeah, and also just the aesthetic of Yuri. It has this more like harsh vibe to it compared to the other two. And I think that might be what I have to say about the game. This is one of those where in skirmish and multiplayer, there's an option for I forget if it's each player in that match or if it's one specifically, but whatever. At least one to have all three factions, and yeah, that's so incredibly entertaining because like they really. The thing is that it means that you do have to build all these different, like, hypothetically, let's say you want a Soviet tank and an Allied tank. Well, you now have to build, both the barracks and the, tank building for both of them. So, it costs a lot of money and time. You have to work really hard to make it work, but it is so worth it. Like, you can't even imagine the joy when you get to a point where you're fast enough where you can make it work, and so your defenses include elements from all three. Your attack force does as well. Like, it is just, I can't praise it enough. They did such an amazing job on this. Like, this is one of my favorites of the expansion packs. It's yeah. And I think that might cover, let's see. Is there anything else left? This is one of those cases where they did have some, like, awkwardness because they were like, oh, we gotta make it different because it's an expansion pack, So, right now I actually can't remember if it's one or the other, but it's either in the cutscenes with live action or it's in-game when you actually have the unit. But Tanya, like, changed her hair color, but only in one of them. So it's slightly awkward. I don't know if maybe, some departments of the development team weren't communicating clearly enough with each other. Maybe it was a last-minute decision, or there was some, hiccup technology-wise or something. But yeah, that was that is slightly awkward in that. Yeah. Yeah, I think that does cover absolutely everything. Let's see. The right. One thing about so the grinder. If you find yourself um, the what's the word? If you build if you train some infantry and then you realize, oh, I actually need the money for something else, you can put them in the grinder, which it's one of those things, like, you almost feel a little bad because, like, when you play, you find yourself thinking this is really useful, and it's like, I mean, I'm not supposed to like this guy. Clearly this is awful. If this was being done in real, well, yeah. uh when we human beings sometimes do awful things to each other in real life, that is terrible, you know. Um, but it is one of those things where sometimes you, in some of these games, you find yourself thinking, if I wish I could just sell the thing that I bought, and it's, there are some of these where that actually is an option, and it's usually greatly appreciated. I think that does cover everything. I like that Yuri's walls have spikes on top, because, like, ultimately it doesn't really make a difference. Like, no one climbs walls in these games, but again, it underlines the ruthless nature of him. And so, yeah, I talked some about how useful for attack the mind control is. Bears mentioning it's also extremely useful for defense. If the enemy is sending, if they're sending their best, they're not bringing drugs or crime. Yeah, take them over, send them right back. Like, if you are able to mind control some of their most effective units and you use them against the rest of their attack force, so that they doubly lose. Not only do they lose part of their attack force, but now they have to fight against the ones that used to be their attack force. And as they're doing that, you can send out some of your attack force to finish off, or sufficiently limit their attack force, so that they'll either retreat or just send whatever's left and maybe not do very much damage at all. I think that does cover, let's see. Yeah, I believe that is absolutely everything about this. Just, yeah. I realize, if you're not already into these, you're probably not going to play something that far back. And as mentioned, it lacks attack move, which, like, had gotten ridiculous by this point. That was in, games from 1998, StarCraft, for example, so that's pretty ridiculous that 3 years later they still don't have it. Like, come on now. Yeah, I think that might cover yeah. I think I will just note that the let's see. Yeah, I think it is really great to fight back if a dangerous leader is deeply unethical, just uses up and then throws away people, and basically, like, seems to have almost like a cult following, although gradually it is dwindling as this leader continues to fail to deliver on the promises that got them elected, and just bragging about the gaudy renovations that, like, who is this appealing to? Like, I think we reached a new low when, I forget who in conservative media, but someone like made excuses for, like, oh, okay, yeah, Trump's falling asleep, but I mean, but there's a maybe some more people needed to read Emperor's New Clothes.